What if I told you that 1 point on the LSAT could be worth $10,000? This test isn't just about getting in, but it's your biggest shot at a full ride. But most students are studying like it's just another midterm. Now, I've been teaching the LSAT for the past 20 years, and these are the top 10 strategies that my most successful students follow, the ones who hit 175 and above and leave law school debt-free. Let's get into it. Most people start studying for the LSAT way too late. They tell themselves, I'll start after finals, or I'll take 2 months in the summer and crank it out, or even worse, I'm a good test taker, I'll be fine. This mindset is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Now here's why. The LSAT is not like any test you've taken before. It doesn't test facts or how well you memorize definitions. It tests how you think, how you process arguments, how precisely you read, and how quickly you spot subtle logic flaws. And changing the way you think takes time, a lot more time than most people expect. If you've ever learned to play an instrument or speak a language or shoot a basketball, you know this. You don't master it in just a few weeks. You've got to build muscle memory, and that comes from consistent, focused practice over months. The LSAT is the same. It's a skills-based exam. That means your progress builds slowly at first, then accelerates later if you stick with it. But if you rush the timeline, you cut off that second part, and you never give yourself the time that you need to hit your full potential. And that's why top scorers you see online, the ones hitting 175 and above, usually studied for 4 or 6 months, not 4 or 6 weeks. Not because they're bad test takers, but because they respect the process. Now, let's say you worked hard all through college to build a 3.8 GPA. That's great, but here's the reality. At most law schools, your LSAT carries more weight than your GPA in both getting in and in getting scholarship money. Why? Because it's standardized. It lets law schools compare students from different universities directly. So if the LSAT's worth more than your GPA and your GPA took years to build, why would you try to knock out the LSAT in just a few weeks? The minimum prep time if you're aiming for top schools and big scholarships has got to be at least 2 to 3 months. And if you're balancing the LSAT with school or work or family responsibilities, it might take a couple months more than that. And that might feel like a long time, but think about what's at stake. A full ride to a top law school versus $200,000 of student debt. It means the difference between a shot at a top job versus grinding for years to pay off loans, and freedom versus financial pressure for the next decade or 2 or 3. Now, if you're still in undergrad, it might be tempting to squeeze the LSAT into your summer vacation. But unless you have a light schedule and a flexible job, that's probably not enough time. What works better is to spread the LSAT prep out over 3 to 4 months, ideally, studying at least a couple hours a day, 5 days a week, starting in January, then taking the test in June, or starting in June and taking the test in, say, October. That way, you're not cramming, but you're giving yourself the time to improve. And if law school has to wait a year, consider taking a gap year after graduation. It gives you more time to focus fully on the LSAT, boost your score, and apply relatively earlier in the cycle. Now, to take the LSAT seriously, you will have to make trade-offs. You might need to scale back your work hours, or cut back on social plans, or tell your parents you're not going straight to law school after graduation, even if that's what they want you to do. That might be hard, but if your goal is to maximize scholarships, get into the best schools possible, and avoid 6 figures of debt, it's worth it. A couple more months of focused prep could change the entire trajectory of your legal career. Now, the second big rule, there is real money in your LSAT score. Every single point you get on the LSAT can be worth thousands of dollars in scholarship money. Not in theory, not as a nice to have, but literally in real life. According to public scholarship data, just 1 additional point on the LSAT is worth, on average, around $10,000 in scholarships. Some schools might offer more, some might offer less. This is not a guarantee about any particular scholarship, but that is the ballpark. We're talking 10 grand for just 1 more point. That means if you improve your score by 5 points, you might qualify for an additional $50,000 in scholarships, maybe even more, depending on where you're applying. And these are scholarships that you do not have to pay back. These are not loans. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why does the LSAT matter so much? Law schools care about two things primarily: your GPA and your LSAT score. Your GPA, of course, shows your long-term academic performance, and the LSAT shows how well you handle logic, analysis, and reading, which are all key skills for law school. But more importantly, LSAT scores are standardized. Law schools cannot control how hard it is to get an A in one college class versus another, but they can compare LSAT scores across every applicant in the country. And that makes it the number one tool that law schools use to rank student applicants. And here's the kicker. Law schools are ranked by the ABA and by US News on the LSAT scores of the students they admit. So they are heavily incentivized to give out huge merit scholarships to people who have strong LSAT scores, even if their GPA or resume is average or even subpar. The LSAT isn't just getting you into law school, it's getting you paid. It's getting you real money. So let's say that School A, for example, has a published range of 160 to 165 LSAT scores for their admitted students. If you apply with a 160, you're a little bit below average. Maybe you get in, maybe you don't. Probably no scholarships associated. But if you apply with a score above 165, you are above the top of their range. That makes you especially valuable. You make their numbers look better, and you help them climb in the rankings. So that's when they're going to offer you serious scholarship money, maybe even a special invitation to honors programs or clinics that other students don't even know about. And this happens even at top 14 law schools. There are people getting into schools like UVA, Northwestern, and Georgetown with serious scholarship money. Not because their GPAs are off the charts or anything, but because they got a high LSAT score. And yes, need-based aid does exist, but it's limited. Most of the real scholarship money, and I'm talking the six figures, comes from merit-based scholarships, which are driven mainly by your LSAT score. Now, there are going to be thousands of applicants with high GPAs because grade inflation is real. What sets you apart is your LSAT score. If you walk in with a score of, say, 174 or above, you've got leverage, and that means you can negotiate your scholarships. You can even get multiple offers from different schools and pit them against each other just like you might a job offer. But if you score below 160, say you get a 158, even if you've got a great personal statement, your options are going to be a lot more limited. Not because you're not smart, but because law schools are working off of metrics and yield formulas. Now, a lot of people will say things like, it's okay, I'll just go into big law and that'll help me pay off my debt faster, or I'll do public interest and get loan forgiveness. Those are risky bets. Yes, big law salaries are high, but the jobs are extremely competitive and you're working 80+ hour weeks, which means burnout and limited control over the lifestyle that you have. And yes, public interest loan forgiveness does exist, but it takes more than 10 years, and there are strict rules associated and lots of bureaucratic hoops to jump through. People also lose eligibility all the time due to small technicalities. The program itself is always at risk of being changed by whoever's in the government. So, in most cases, the better move is not to take the debt on in the first place. And the LSAT gives you a way to do just that. Of course, you can't go back and fix your freshman year grades from college. You can't change where you went to college, and you can't redo your internships or write a new resume from scratch. But you still can raise your LSAT score right now. And doing that gives you an immediate and a massive return. It doesn't take years to see the benefits. One additional point could save you $10,000, and 5 more points could change the entire trajectory of your legal career. Imagine walking into law school knowing that you have to pay 0 tuition, no loans, no stress. You get to focus just on your classes, your clinics, making law review, not working part-time just to pay your rent. That is what a high LSAT score buys you. And the wild part is that most people never even do the math. They're so focused on just getting it over with that they miss the fact that this is the one place where effort directly translates into dollars. You want to treat your prep like that's true because it is. Rule number 3, invest in yourself like it actually matters. Most people say they want to crush the LSAT, but when it comes time to actually invest in help, they hesitate. They might drop $200 on a night out, $80 on a new outfit, $1,000 or more on a vacation they can barely afford, but when it comes time to invest in their LSAT prep, which could literally change the next 40 years of their career, they hesitate and say, that's kind of expensive. This is what I call fake frugality, cutting corners in the places that actually matter while spending freely on stuff that doesn't move the needle at all. If you're serious about getting into law school with scholarship money, you've got to start thinking like a long-term investor, not someone just trying to get through the test. Yes, it is possible to self-study and do well, and plenty of people do. There are great books out there, great YouTube videos. I've made some myself, by the way, and there are Reddit threads, podcasts, blog posts. But the thing is, you're still paying with your time. You're spending time guessing what to do next, time spinning your wheels, time doing 30 practice questions and not understanding why you missed number 18. That kind of solo effort through self-study adds up over time. It might feel productive, but without getting feedback, without any structure, without strategy, it's really just practice without progress. I mean, what's the point of putting in 20 hours a week of studying if your score stays stuck at a 159? Now, great LSAT coaching doesn't just explain the test. It fixes the way that you approach the test. Great coaching can help you spot patterns you've been missing, break bad habits you didn't even know you had, and cut through the noise to focus on what actually matters. This is not about hand-holding. It's about speed, clarity, and progress. I mean, you could figure it out on your own in 6 to 8 months, but a great coach might help you get there in 3 months. That would be 5 months or more of time saved and getting a score that actually gets you scholarship money. So let's break this down with some simple math. Imagine you're at a 162 and you want to score 167 or above to get scholarship negotiation leverage. You could spend a couple $1,000s on LSAT coaching. And let's say that LSAT coaching got you a 5-point jump. Those 5 points could earn you $50,000 in law school scholarship money in exchange for, say, $3,000 to $5,000 invested up front. That's more than a 10x return. No stock market investments, no cryptocurrency, and no 401k is going to give you that kind of return. You've just got to see the LSAT for what it is, a skill that you can build with real dollar signs attached. Now, you might be thinking, well, what happens if I don't get help? You'll probably still improve, I'll be honest about that. That's how practice and exposure work. But you may hit a plateau. Most people do at some point, and that's not personal to you. We're all human. We all have blind spots, and we all miss stuff. We all fall into patterns that feel right, but aren't. And the thing is, without guidance, you don't even know where you're stuck because you can't see your own blind spots. I've seen this hundreds of times. Smart, hardworking students who cap out in the low 160s and can't figure out why they can't break into the 170s. Usually, it's just 1 or 2 subtle errors that keep repeating. And once someone points it out, the ceiling disappears. That's the value of having an outside perspective. Now, let me be clear. Investing in yourself doesn't mean buying every single course, every single book, or every single coaching program that you see on social media. It means choosing one proven system or one mentor and actually committing. It means putting in the work between your coaching sessions, reviewing smarter, not just harder, showing up with questions, applying feedback, and tracking your progress. That's what separates the students who just try everything from the ones who actually improve. Now, if you're watching this, you're already the kind of person who takes this test seriously. You're not just trying to coast. So the question is, are you willing to bet on yourself? Because that's what investing really is. It's saying, I believe that I can get better, and I'm willing to back that belief with time, energy, and money. That's what every high scorer I've worked with has done. They don't hope, they build. They don't dabble, they commit. And they don't wait for luck, they create leverage. The LSAT doesn't care how smart you are. It rewards practice, analysis, and strategy but only if you're willing to treat it like it matters. And once you do, you stop seeing LSAT prep as a cost. You start seeing it for what it is, the best financial decision that you'll ever make. Rule 4, accept that the right answer is right even if you don't like it. This rule is simple to say, but hard to follow. If the LSAT says an answer is right, it's right. If they say it's wrong, it's wrong. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Most people think they accept this, but the moment they hit a tricky logical reasoning question and get stuck between two choices, they go into what I call debate mode. They'll say, okay, I know the answer is A, but B could also work, right? Not on the LSAT. This is not a college essay where multiple interpretations are welcome. The LSAT isn't interested in creativity. It's testing your ability to apply logic precisely. And once you know how the test is built, you're going to realize that every wrong answer is wrong on purpose, for a reason. That reason is findable, learnable, and repeatable. When people resist the correct answer, they often tell themselves they're just being skeptical or analytical. But most of the time, what's actually happening is they misunderstood the passage or the stimulus, they misread or overinterpreted the answer choices, or they're bringing in outside assumptions or personal logic. And that's dangerous, because the LSAT is built to trap people who almost understand the logic, but not quite. This test rewards discipline, not creativity. So when you look at a question and think two answers seem right, you want to stop and ask yourself, what does the test know that I'm missing? That's how you train your brain to get better, not by debating the test, but by studying how it thinks. Now, here's a practical system to fix this issue. When you're stuck between two answers, don't move on. You want to slow down, circle the question, and this is where the real improvement's going to happen. Then you go back to the stimulus or the passage and you reread it out loud if you need to and ask yourself, what exactly is the main point? What type of question is this? And what is being assumed, implied, or concluded? Then you write down why you think each answer might be right. And you want to be specific here, not just saying B makes sense, but rather B matches the conclusion and avoids the flaw. Then you flip it around and write down why each choice might be wrong. And that's the key. If you can't explain why an answer is incorrect, not just why the other one's better, you haven't yet finished reviewing. Then you can, of course, look up an explanation and compare what you thought with what the explanation says. And if they differ, ask yourself, what rule did I not apply? Or what assumption did I make? Then you turn it into a rule that you can add to your personal error log or mistake journal. You might say something like, don't justify an answer because it feels right, justify it based on the question stem. Then you review those rules on a weekly basis to build up your intuition. If you do this consistently, your accuracy will increase, not because you're suddenly smarter, but because you're now aligned with the way the LSAT is built. And once you can get yourself inside the heads of the test makers, you'll see the same tricks over and over. For example, you'll recognize patterns in wrong answers like it being too strong, outside the scope, flipping the logic, making something that's half right and half wrong, or something that's true, but not necessarily relevant. Once you start spotting these patterns in wrong answer choices, they'll stop fooling you, and that, of course, is the goal here. Now, remember that you're not here to be right, you're here to learn to think like the test makers, and that is a huge mental reframe. If you think your reasoning makes more sense than the LSAT's, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Not because the LSAT is smarter, but because they're the ones who define the rules. Trying to out-argue the LSAT is like arguing with gravity. It doesn't care what you think. It just works how it works. Top scorers don't try to bring the LSAT into their logic. They train themselves to live in the logic of the LSAT. They learn the patterns, they follow the rules, and they analyze outcomes based on internal consistency, not their own personal opinions. When you reach that point, the LSAT gets a whole lot easier, because now you're not questioning the test, you're using it. Rule number 5, don't repeat your mistakes, build a system that makes you better every day. Most LSAT students make the same mistake over and over. They take a test, they score it, they glance at the questions they got wrong, and they tell themselves, I won't miss that one again, and then they move on. No deep review, no pattern recognition, no changes to their process. And then, a few days later, they miss a different version of the same question type. And that's why people get stuck. Not because they're not smart, but because they don't have a review system that actually turns mistakes into progress. Now, when you get a question wrong, you're not just missing that one question. It's a symptom of something deeper. It could be a misunderstanding of the logic, a blind spot in how you read, or maybe a habit of jumping to conclusions. But if you don't take the time to diagnose the root cause, you're guaranteed to see that same mistake again. It's going to show up in different wording, on a different topic, maybe in a different section. And the thing is, it's going to fool you again next time around because you never solved the original problem. So stop asking yourself, how do I get more questions right? And instead start asking, how do I stop getting the same ones wrong? That's where real improvement comes from. And you don't need a fancy app. You don't need to put in several hours a night. You just need a simple process you follow every single time that you miss a question. The first step is to do a double why review. You ask yourself 2 questions, 2 whys, and then you write down the answers. The first question you ask is, why did I choose the wrong answer? What made me think it was right? What words or ideas tricked me? Did I rush? Did I misread? Or fall for a trap? The second question is, why didn't I choose the right one? Did I misunderstand the logic? Was I too focused on surface level wording? Or did I mislabel the question type? And this step is of course uncomfortable because it forces you to be honest about what really happened. But that honesty is where growth is going to come from. Then, second step, you turn that insight into a personal rule. Once you understand the mistake that you made, you create a short, specific takeaway that you can use next time. This is your anti-mistake rule. For example, it might be something like, don't treat correlations as causation, or in principal questions, match the structure, not the topic. Or it might be skeptical of strong language unless the stimulus supports it. Each rule should be specific, easy to remember, and based on your thought process. These are not meant to be generic LSAT tips. They're tailored to the way that you think and approach the LSAT, and that's why they work. Then you take them and write them down in your mistake journal. That could be a Google Doc, a Notion page, or even a paper notebook. Doesn't matter. The point is to see the patterns. Ask yourself, what kinds of mistakes are you making? Which question types trip you up? Are you rushing in reading comp, but maybe over-analyzing in logical reasoning? This mistake journal becomes your personal LSAT playbook. Review it every single week before you do drills, before you take full practice tests, and of course, before test day itself. And over time, you're going to notice fewer repeated mistakes, clearer thinking, and higher scores, not because you're doing more questions, but because you're doing fewer things wrong. And that's efficiency. That's smarter prep. And once your journal grows over time, you can start sorting your entries by question type, for example, flaw, strengthen, weaken, must be true, parallel, and so on. This is going to help you see where you're bleeding points. Then you can target your drills. Instead of guessing what to do next, you'll know exactly where to focus. Now, most people plateau on the LSAT not because they stop studying, but because they stop learning from what they study. They keep making the same decision-making mistakes. They keep reviewing too fast, and they keep saying, I won't do that again, and then they do. The fix is not grinding harder, it's building a feedback loop that gets tighter every single week. Every mistake should make you sharper, and every review session should make you faster, more accurate, and more confident. If you follow this system for just 2 weeks, you're going to cut your mistakes in half, you'll feel less frustrated after every practice test, and you'll actually look forward to review because now it's making you better. That's how top scorers operate, and that's how you build momentum. Rule number 6, turn off the clock, master accuracy before you chase speed. Most LSAT students do this backwards. They start with the timer on, they rush through questions trying to simulate test day, and as a result, they feel stressed, make sloppy mistakes, then beat themselves up for being too slow. That's like trying to run a marathon before you can jog a mile. Speed without accuracy is worthless. It doesn't matter how fast you go if you're going in the wrong direction. If you're serious about getting a high score, you've got to slow down to speed up. The thing is, when you study without a timer, your brain tells you that you're being lazy. You'll think to yourself, I'm wasting time, I should be training under pressure, or this isn't realistic. But that's just your anxiety talking. You don't build expertise under pressure. You build it in quiet, controlled practice where you can focus on doing it right. I mean, think about how elite athletes train. Steph Curry doesn't start his day with defenders in his face. He starts alone in his gym, drilling the same shot over and over. And Serena Williams doesn't only play full matches. She practices serves, forehands, footwork, slowly, repeatedly, without an opponent. That's how mastery happens, one clean rep at a time. And the LSAT is no different. But when the timer's on, your brain goes into survival mode. You glance instead of reading carefully. You might choose answers that feel right, and you rush your reasoning just to stay on track. And this kind of practice creates false confidence. You might feel like you're getting through sections, but you're not building the skills that actually raise your score. Accuracy is the foundation. If you can't get a question right untimed, there's no way you're going to get it right under pressure. So the first phase of your study plan should look like this. Untimed practice until you're at about 80% or better on drills. Then you introduce light timing, then move into full timed sections once your fundamentals are rock solid. That is the real path to speed. Now here's what high scorers do while they're doing untimed drilling. They pause after every single question and they ask themselves, why is this answer right and why are the others wrong? This builds your decision-making muscles. Then you write down your reasoning. Before you check the answer, you explain out loud or in writing what you're predicting or eliminating, and this forces you to get crystal clear on your thought process. Then you compare your reasoning to the actual answer, not just asking, was I right? But was I right for the right reason? Then you can spot your recurring thought errors or mistakes. For example, are you constantly rushing conclusions? Are you misreading quantifiers like some and most? Or maybe you're falling for trap answers with strong language. This is what deep practice looks like. It's slow, it's focused, and it's insanely effective. Now, people will ask me, how long should I keep doing untimed work for? And there's no magic answer here, but as a general rule of thumb, if your accuracy is below 80%, keep the clock off, keep working untimed. Once you hit 80 to 85% accuracy consistently, you can start easing into timed work. Once you're accurate and feeling confident about it, you can then move on to doing full sections. It might take 2 weeks, it might take 2 months, but that's okay. The time that you lose now is time you're going to save later because you won't be spinning your wheels. And when you finally return back to those full-length practice tests, you're going to feel a huge difference. You'll be able to read faster without rushing, you'll be able to eliminate wrong answers with precision, and you'll finish with time to spare. Not because you directly practiced speed, but because you built up your understanding. And so that's the ironic thing about this. The way to get faster is to stop trying to be fast. Rule 7. Stop avoiding hard questions. This is one of the biggest mindset traps LSAT students fall into. They'll tell themselves, I'll save those for later, or I'm not ready for the 4-star or 5-star questions yet, or let me just build confidence with the easy ones first. It feels productive, it feels logical, but it's actually a long-term score killer. If you're always avoiding the hard stuff, you're avoiding the very thing that makes you better. Easy questions don't teach you anything new. If you already know how to solve a 2-star logical reasoning question, doing more of them doesn't build new skills. It just gives you a sense of fake confidence. It's like lifting 10-pound dumbbells every day and wondering why your strength hasn't improved. The answer is simple. You're not giving yourself enough resistance to grow. The LSAT is a thinking test. It rewards deep focus, error correction, and adaptability. And you only build those muscles by pushing into the edge of your ability. There are 3 zones of practice. The first is the comfort zone. That might be where you are right now, where you're getting most questions right, makes you feel good, but you're not improving. The second zone is the growth zone. That's where you struggle, you make mistakes, and you might feel frustrated, but you're learning. This is the sweet spot. The third zone is the zone of overwhelm, where you feel totally lost, you shut down, and nothing sticks. That's when you may have gone a little bit too far. Your goal is to live in the growth zone, especially when you're drilling. This means choosing question types that might scare you a little bit. It means grappling with that weird parallel flaw question that makes your head spin. It means embracing questions where you don't understand it on the first read-through. But that's where the score jumps come from, because every question you get wrong is an opportunity to learn something new. And so you've got to slow down the review process when you're in the growth zone. Give yourself permission to spend 15-20 minutes on a single tough question. Your goal isn't to get it right quickly, it's to understand it deeply. Ask yourself, what made this question hard? Where did I get confused? And what would I need to see to avoid this mistake the next time around? Then you redline your process. You write out your reasoning before you check the answer. Seriously, put it on paper. Predict the right answer, eliminate the wrong ones, and explain your thought process. Then compare your logic to the correct logic. Where did it break down? That is your learning moment. Then you turn the pain of getting it wrong into patterns for better understanding. Every tough question has something to teach you, but only if you use it. So after reviewing, write down a rule for yourself. For example, it might be something like, don't ignore conditional logic in answer choices, but rather test it. Then add it to your mistake journal and review it on a weekly basis to reinforce the lesson. Then you can re-drill the same question later. You come back to it maybe 1-2 weeks later and see if you now recognize the structure faster, avoid the same mistake, and apply your rule correctly. If you do, that's a sign that the lesson stuck. If it didn't, review again. Now I know it's uncomfortable to feel lost. No one likes being confused, but confusion is the first step on the road to clarity. When you avoid the tough questions, here's what really happens. Your weaknesses will stay hidden, your confidence becomes fragile, and you plateau because you're never stretching your skill set. The best students I've worked with weren't the ones who got everything right the first time. They were the ones who went toward the pain and toward the confusion, not away from it. They practiced failing so they could learn faster. They built their confidence through struggle, not by avoiding it. And then, as a result, they walked into test day knowing they could handle anything the LSAT threw at them because they already had. Rule number 8, use Law Hub to practice exactly how you'll perform. This is one of the dumbest mistakes I see smart students make. They'll practice for months using PDFs, books, or third-party apps. Then they show up on test day and get totally thrown off by the official LSAT interface. It's got a different layout, a different font, and different tools. Suddenly, they're burning mental energy just trying to figure out how to highlight text or eliminate choices. Why? Because they've never trained in the actual test environment. If you're wondering what Law Hub is, it's LSAC's official online platform. LSAC is the Law School Admission Council. They're the people who make the LSAT, and they've created this platform called Law Hub where they administer the LSAT online. This platform allows you to practice with dozens of real, actual, official LSAT exams in the exact format that you'll see on test day. I know it's not super flashy, it doesn't give you analytics or AI-generated study plans, but it does one thing extremely well. It shows you how the test will actually look, feel, and function. That alone makes it worth using for every single practice session. Now, here's what practicing on Law Hub helps you master. It gives you the exact font and spacing you'll read on test day. It gives you the layout, including the timer, and lets you manage it without panicking. It shows you where to click to flag questions, highlight text, or eliminate answers, and it lets you practice all those little interface quirks like how the scroll bar behaves. I know that none of these might seem like a big deal until you're under the pressure of the real thing. Every second that you spend confused by the software is a second that you're not solving the logic of the question in front of you. And that's how you lose points. Not because you didn't know the answer, but because you were distracted by a clunky interface that you had never practiced with. If you use LawHub for your studying, you prevent that exact issue. And no, they're not paying me to promote them, but I kind of wish they were. So here's how to use LawHub the right way. You don't just use it once a week for your full practice tests. You use it every single day while you're studying. You can use it for drilling individual logical reasoning questions. You can use it for flagging and skipping questions when you're doing timed sections. And you can use it for full sections and full exams under real conditions. Not pausing the clock to go to the bathroom, not having multiple browser tabs open, not playing music, just you, LawHub, your scratch paper, and that ticking countdown timer. That is how you reduce surprises on test day because it feels familiar. Now, I know that you might want to track your analytics, your accuracy, pacing, and performance over time, and you can still do all of that in a spreadsheet or a Google Doc after the fact. But don't trade using some fancy dashboard for the most important thing, which is getting comfortable with the actual test format. Flashy graphs are not going to get you to 170 plus. What will is focused practice in the real testing environment. Bottom line is you want to practice the same way you're going to play. There are not any shortcuts here. If you're not training in the format you'll be tested in, you're leaving points on the table. And because LawHub is the exact platform the LSAT is given on, you want to use it for all your studying, for your drills, for your full sections, for every step of your prep. Rule number 9, you've got to know what actually moves your scores. Practice tests are like thermometers. They tell you your current score, they'll show you where you're at, but they're not actually going to fix anything. They don't tell you how to improve. In contrast, drills are like thermostats. They're what you use to make adjustments, and they're what actually moves the needle. Once you understand the difference, your entire study process changes, because now you can stop wasting time measuring your score and start actually improving it. In my experience, most students overuse practice tests and underuse drills. You might see a student who wants to hit a 170, so they start doing full exams every single week, sometimes twice, even 3 times a week, but their scores don't move. They just kind of bounce around between, say, a 162 and a 166 over and over. They're putting in the work, but nothing's clicking because they're stuck in that thermometer mode. They're constantly measuring, but they're not making changes. Now, of course, practice tests are useful sometimes, they do matter, but only when they're used intentionally. They're used to check whether your score or understanding has improved after doing focused drills. They are checkpoints, but they're not actually the workout. And they can sometimes become a crutch. And you notice this when you're seeing that you're making the same mistakes repeatedly, you're getting fatigued faster, and you're burning through your exams too early. That's how people waste 20 exams or more without breaking through their plateau, because they never fixed the root cause issue. Drills, however, are where the real work happens. They are short, focused sessions where you isolate one skill and you work on it until it improves. That might mean doing 10 weekend questions back to back, or 3 science reading comp passages in a row, or maybe reviewing 5 flaw questions, then breaking down every single one of the trap answers. This is deliberate practice. It's surgical. It might be boring sometimes, but it works. Now, here's a simple structure that works for the vast majority of my students. Phase 1 is skill building. This is the first 4 to 6 weeks of your prep. You're spending roughly 80% of your time on drilling and 20% of your time on untimed sections. Then phase 2, strategy and endurance, is weeks 7 through 10. That's where you spend half your time on drills, 30% on timed sections, and 20% on full exams. Then pull it all together in phase 3 with test simulation. That's the final 3-4 weeks before the test. This is where you spend roughly 30% of your time on drills and 70% of your time on full exams with in-depth review. That's how you build, then test, then refine. Not just reacting to your scores, but instead controlling them by building the foundation first. Now, if you're going to take a full practice test, you want to make it count. So don't just check your score. You want to review in depth every question you missed or guessed on, even if you got it right, because it could have just as easily gone the other way next time around. Then you pick 1 or 2 types of questions that you struggled with and drill them in depth. Not 50 of them, maybe just 10 of them, slowly and carefully. What this means is you're using the practice test to set your thermostat. It's telling you what needs attention that you can then go fix with drills. So remember that if your score hasn't moved in weeks, it might be that you're measuring too much and adjusting too little. So don't just take more practice tests, take a smarter approach by using your thermostat to increase your score. Rule 10, study like a professional. Because getting a top LSAT score doesn't require studying 6 hours a day. In fact, if you're studying that much, you're probably doing something wrong. The LSAT is not about brute force. It's about quality over quantity, consistency over intensity, and systems over motivation. Top scorers don't just study harder, they study smarter with good habits that compound over time. So this rule is about how to build those habits and stop burning yourself out. I know that most of us probably grew up cramming for exams, staying up too late, drinking too much caffeine, pulling an all-nighter, then crashing after the test. You just cannot do that with the LSAT. This is not a test of memorization. It's not about the content. It's about how you think, and thinking cannot be crammed. Skills have to be built over time through repetition, reflection, and rest. So, if you're trying to grind it out with long, unsustainable study sessions, you're setting yourself up for burnout. You don't need 30, 40 hours a week of LSAT prep. You just need the right 10-15 hours applied with discipline and intention. In my experience, the ideal formula is 1 or 2 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. If you're working full-time or you're in school, that's totally fine, but you've got to protect your LSAT study time, and it's non-negotiable. This is what allows you to stay mentally sharp, avoid burnout, and build a powerful routine. It also gives you time to review, which is where the real learning happens. You're not trying to do more, you're trying to do better. Because you don't need to study longer. You don't need 6 hours a day if you're studying the right way. A focused 90-minute study session might look like 10 minutes of review, 40 minutes of drilling, 10 minutes of deep review after that drilling, and then 30 minutes of timed work. That's it. You stop, you walk away, and you come back tomorrow. Now, I know you're not always going to feel like studying, and that's totally normal. High performers don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. And so to build that habit, you want to set aside a specific study time, ideally the same time each day and the same environment each time. You then use a calendar where you block off the time to again make it non-negotiable. Have your study materials ready to go. You're not wasting time setting up here, and you're tracking your study results every single time in a spreadsheet or in a journal. The goal here is to make LSAT prep part of your routine, just like you brush your teeth or go to the gym. There's no decision fatigue here because it is automatic. Now, you've got to respect rest as well. It might sound counterintuitive, but rest is part of the plan. Fatigue is real. Burnout is real. If you overtrain your brain, your performance will drop. That's why we actually build days off into our students' LSAT study plans so that they don't burn out. You need time for your brain to reset. That way, you come back sharper, more focused, and less drained. Now remember that you don't need marathon 6-hour study sessions. They might feel productive, but they're counterproductive. You need focused, shorter sprints. And you shouldn't need to conjure up the motivation to study because you can develop a system that keeps you on track no matter what. And you don't need all day to study. You just need 1-2 hours a day consistently. And if you feel yourself burning out midway through the week, that's fine. Take a break. Go take a 20-minute walk. Journal your frustrations. Revisit your goals, then get back to work the next day. Most importantly, remember that the LSAT is a learnable skill. It is not a personality test. It's not an IQ test. It's not a mystery how to conquer this exam. If you follow these rules, you won't just study harder, you'll study smarter. You'll avoid the traps that keep most students stuck, and you'll build a system that actually works. You already know what to do, now go do it.